Welcome to Bridging the Gap, presented by the Dialogue Studio at Greenwood. This podcast was created to open space for honest conversations between community leaders, public servants, and the people they serve. Conversations rooted in transparency, accountability, understanding, and trust. Produced through the Dialogue Studio at Greenwood and in partnership with the Greenwood Cultural Center, Bridging the Gap explores the challenges, tensions, and opportunities that exist at the intersection of public safety and community relationships. In this inaugural episode, community advocate Jonathan Townsend sits down with Tulsa Police Department Deputy Chief Mark Warmenhauser for a candid discussion about policing, historical distrust, transparency, public safety, and the personal relationship that led to this dialogue. Together, they reflect on the importance of communication, the power of community engagement, and why difficult conversations are often the beginning of meaningful progress. These discussions won't always be simple, they won't always be comfortable, but they are necessary. This is Bridging the Gap.
Welcome to the Bridging the Gap Safe Tulsa podcast. This is the first ever. I am your host, Jonathan Townsend, and it is an absolute pleasure to be here today with a dynamic co-host slash guest slash friend, Deputy Chief of Tulsa Police Department, Mark Warmenhauser. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm great, Jonathan. It's great to be here.
It is fantastic to have you here. I'm extremely excited to spend a little bit of time with you today and to kick off these series of conversations that we plan to be having ongoing. And so I'm just extremely excited about that. The fact that this is really being powered and brought to you today on behalf of the Greenwood Cultural Center, a fantastic institution here in Tulsa, Oklahoma, that has for years just played a pivotal part in maintaining the legacy and keeping people educated about the history of the African-American culture and especially the Greenwood community. So we want to thank them for the opportunity of just kind of helping us bridge the gap and bring about different collaborations over the last year or so, especially between myself and you all at the police department. But also want to shout out Birthright Legacy for allowing us to be in their space today. I had a chance to come out a few weeks ago and get a tour of this space and just fell in love with it. And so I want to shout out Brother Marquise Dennis and everything that he's doing to help empower fathers and all throughout the city, giving them the resources and the workshops that they need to be successful fathers as well. So we're really excited, again, to be able to have these conversations talking about public safety in our community. Deputy Chief, just tell us a little bit about how long you've been serving here in Tulsa and what brings us to this table today.
But no, I was born and raised in Tulsa, and I've been a Tulsa police officer for over 21 years now. Loved it. Have served in every single bureau of the department, investigations, patrol, creative, up at the academy. And it's just through some blessings and some opportunities over at least the last decade that I think has really brought myself and the department into a lot more of a community connection in regards to our policing. And I think that's how, quite frankly, me and you ended up friends and ended up sitting here 10 years after meeting each other.
Indeed. Tell us, and it's funny that you say that because, hey, this is kind of rookie season mode for me. I've been in podcasts before. I've never been on the side of the facilitator. Can you tell us a little bit about just your role specifically, like for those who are listening today and don't really understand what a deputy chief is or what that...
So there are about 1,000 to 1,100 employees for the Tulsa Police Department, and about 800 to 850 of them are police officers. And there are 3 deputy chiefs in the entire police department that answer to the chief of police. I am over operations. And so, like I said, there's 850 Tulsa police officers, or around 850 Tulsa police officers.
Wow.
About 570 of them wear a uniform on a day-to-day basis, and that is who I oversee. And so if you think of the uniform divisions that people go and interact with and the officers that respond to help them, but also the support structure of our air support unit, our K9 unit. If any of you have ever flown out at the airport and you see our bomb dogs walking around, it's that kind of stuff that I oversee on a day-to-day basis. And it's really the people that have the most interaction face-to-face with the public.
With that being said, what I wanted to do too, just for fun, and we're keeping it real casual and comfortable here. Can you tell the people a little bit, at least your perspective, on just how you and I got to know each other? And I want to see how it adds up and how it matches up with my account of the story too, and see if you remember. You kind of touched on a little bit, at least being how long it's been. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I do want to go back to your appreciation, but of me being here. But I do want to say that I think maybe a decade or two ago, we would too often maybe relegate this responsibility down to an officer, a supervisor, right? Mm-hmm. And while that's great, and you do need to know your officers, and so to me and to the command staff of the Tulsa Police Department, it's important that we show up to these things, because we want the community to know that this is super important. And it's so important that the policy decision makers show up and we are ready to listen and ready to have those conversations that sometimes are difficult, but we want to be there to hear it and possibly bring some different changes. About 10 years ago, I had barely been a captain for maybe a year tops, and there was a great opportunity that was put on by Leadership Tulsa called Community and Police Leadership Collaborative. And it brought together officers and some community members around Tulsa to just kind of better understand each other. And I saw the opportunity it was, and I kind of raised my hand and a friend of mine invited me into this space, and I was able to learn from so many that were there. But you and I got paired up because I know you also. I don't know how you got into the mix of that, and do you remember?
You might not remember, but as far as that goes, but if you remember, I used to work for the mayor at the time.
I do.
Community Development and Policy.
That's what it was.
Assistance for Mayor Bynum at the time, and just being at the city of Tulsa and interacting with you guys, at the city for sure, but also through that program, it gave me a chance to kind of see some of the behind the scene things, and that's how I ended up being able to tap into that program with you. And you're right, they partnered us. We didn't choose each other. They kind of, I don't know, just rolled us out there and put us together. So
getting to know you, getting to grow as your friend, but definitely during that program, it was probably one of the most eye-opening experiences I've ever had, and I attribute it to you. But I also am somewhat ashamed of my ignorance, having grown up in Tulsa my entire life and not knowing nearly as much of Greenwood and the experience of Greenwood and the Black community. Yeah. And so us pairing up, if you remember, we each had to kind of give each other experiences, right? And I took you on a ride along with, I want to say it was the gang unit, right?
Yes, it was.
So
I got the roll with the big boys.
That's right. But what again I took away was when you took me down to Greenwood, and we kind of did like a walking tour of Greenwood, and went up to Greenwood Cultural Center. But you pointed out to me, because I had driven by numerous times, but I don't think I ever really stopped to pay attention. And it was the plaques you had pointed out to me and that were in the sidewalk. And then I had always seen the front of that big black marble slab in front of Greenwood Cultural Center, but never had really looked at the back. And it was all those businesses. And I had this visual of it in the 2000s of, well, how could that be? There's this college here and everything. And it was not putting my geography and history hat on of how did that come to be? And so it was very powerful to me, and just helped me understand more and more of what the Black community in Tulsa has gone through, and how much more I need to do as a leader on the Tulsa Police Department to make that connection. And I was just so thankful that we got paired up, because since then I think we've continued to work on those things.
Yeah, and it's amazing. I mean, just to think about like the intentionality of that program and just how well it actually benefited us. Like, we can't speak for every couple that was paired up in that group, but and I hope everybody's had at least a fraction of the experience that we've had. But we've been able to stay in contact, build other programs, essentially, give birth to other programs and ideas because of that connection. And it's funny that you mentioned that, because I mean, what a life-changing experience it was for me too. The knowledge that I got about the department and the responsibilities that you guys have, and the weight of that responsibility. It was just tremendous. when they put us together, like you said, and we got to do things like the ride along. Like, it's funny you mentioned that too, because I don't want to get into all the details of it. But just being a guy that likes to watch a lot of like TV shows, like I watch a lot of Cops and some of the used to watch a live PD and stuff like that a lot. It doesn't compare at all to when you're actually in the doggone vehicle with you. You know, I was riding along with you, and I think the other guy, I can't remember his name, but it was the two of you and then myself, and I'm like, we're about to go do this for real, and everything was I'm sure the environment was as controlled as possible. I bet I didn't see everything probably that I could have seen, but at the same time, it was very real, and there's nothing scripted about it, and you never know how the other person's gonna pop off, or you know, when they're being engaged, because you guys were actually doing your job and checking people and keeping people safe, keeping our community safe, and you just never know how people are gonna respond in a moment, and they don't care that you got a guest or anything. But what I will say is, if you ever get an opportunity to do it, I do suggest it. At the same time, if you're a little nervous, then maybe you can just ask somebody like me who's been through it, you know, what it's like. What has made you so passionate about, you know, interfacing with the community in this special way? And also on behalf of the department, because what we're doing right now isn't necessarily happening in every department throughout the country. And I'm sure you compare and contrast to other departments and seeing what they're doing as far as transparency goes. So why is it so important to you to just break it down and just talk to the people as often as you do? Why is Tulsa positioned to do that? So
I think it's incumbent upon us to counter narratives, because so I know I'm a Tulsan, lifelong Tulsan, and so I am this community, and I want people to know who their officers are. If you don't make that outreach and you don't make that connection and you don't bridge that gap, then quite frankly, we are going to be portrayed as every other law enforcement agency in this country. And I don't want to be portrayed as every other law enforcement agency in this country, because I've seen the lack of education in some of those departments, the lack of training in some of those departments, and the lack of compassion in some of those departments. And so if we don't have that connection, then people only can be left to paint us with the brush of the national narrative. We have to get out and explain who we are. Just as also when we do that, we get to then understand the community who we serve. And that community is not painted with a broad brush. We actually see everyone as individuals. And so that to me is why it's so important to get out, to make those connections, because it just helps keep so many neighborhoods much more safe when we see each other as persons and not as what Fox News or CNN or whoever wants to tell us whatever this group is about.
Like I said, just from a community perspective or just as an average citizen perspective, you know, I look at that. I really value that. I've done some research and have talked to, you know, friends and family who live in, you know, different parts of the country, and have even, you know, shared what we're doing right now with like friends and family who live in other places, and they're like, yeah, it'd be awesome if our department would do things like that, because we got a lot of questions and I just don't have an avenue or the space to get answers. This is going to give people a chance to just, you know, from the comfort of their home, just tune right in and to hear, you know, about different topics and discussions that are happening, issues that, you know, that they want and feel like the community might deserve a little bit more insight on, and we're going to provide that opportunity for them, which is extremely unique, I think, as it relates to other departments. So shout out to TPD for that. I think one thing that I kind of wanted to do too was just explain to the people. They might be wondering, you know, why I'm sitting here. You know, for sure, we understand why you are. And Deputy Chief talked a little bit about our relationship over the years. When I did work at the mayor's office, I had a chance to do a lot of interfacing and advocating for the African-American community on behalf of the Biden administration. And even since I left that role and started doing some other things, you and I stayed in contact and continue to do some things behind the scenes, at least have conversations for the last, year or so. And we've been working on some community relations and community policing initiatives with other wonderful community leaders from the African-American community, and meeting at the Greenwood Cultural Center. And something that just kept coming up in some of the, you know, workshops that I facilitated for you guys, for your officers and for our leaders, was the need for more communication, the need for, you know, more transparency. You know, this right here is just kind of a ripple effect of that too. I think you and I about a few months ago, we're having coffee at a spot and just having a powerful conversation, talking about a lot of relevant things that were happening and things that were about to happen and needed to happen. And we were just like, what the heck? This is a great conversation. And why can't we have this conversation in public?
Absolutely.
Why can't we have this conversation in a format where everyone can hear what we're talking about? And from that came, it was like, hey, well, let's do the podcast, right? But we wanted to give a space for people to be able to, gather this information, because there are a lot of people in our community who want to know, why do you guys do the things you do? Why you make the decisions that you make, or have the strategies that you have, and they care. And many of them, there's a lot that they do understand, and there's some things that they don't. And so this would be a space for that. But again, in the conversations that you and I were having, we were like, it would be awesome. How dope would it be to have a public setting for that? As far as the rhyme and reason, as to why we're here. Because another thing that we discovered through those workshops that we've been having over the last year or so was that there's still a disconnect. Like, we're talking a lot, I've given you guys some kudos, and you guys got kudos from the groups that we had. But at the same time, there was a lot of things that people were still either suspicious about or had legitimate critiques about. Whatever the reason is, there was still some disconnects. And I would like to just kind of ask, like, what are some of the reasons for some disconnects? And when I say disconnects, I'm talking about information as it flows out, maybe from you all or about you all. You kind of talked about some of the media outlets already. And then by the time it gets to the general public, maybe it's not received the way that maybe things transpired, or for whatever reason it's not interpreted the way that maybe you guys thought.
So I kind of want to start off at that coffee shop conversation, and I want to talk to people about the success, the little victories, right? Like this is a little victory kicking off today. And when I was division commander over Mingo Valley Division, which is basically all of our east side, large Hispanic population, I was invited by a community leader to go on Spanish radio every week and go direct with people. A lot of the Spanish-speaking community listens to radio, and I made that commitment. Once a week, we are on Spanish radio, and that has continued. That started in June of 2020, in the height of all kinds of everything going on. And 6 years later, we're still doing it. And it's made a difference. We've been invited into congregations when something big in the Hispanic community comes up, whether it's immigration or some law or policing. We've made those connections. And so we are able to go direct and talk as Tulsa police officers of relax. We got you. We're here to protect people and make sure nobody's victimized. And it was because of the little victory of being invited into Spanish-speaking radio and going direct. And so when we kicked this off, and the other thing too was issues, not every issue is the same in every community around Tulsa.
Facts. Everybody's needs are valid. Everyone's needs need to be addressed, but everyone's needs are not always the exact same.
Correct. And I think we see that as an opportunity that, there are some things that cut across all communities, but if we're not talking about the needs and the relationship of the Black community and the police department, then and we're trying to generalize it, then we're missing that opportunity. And so I think that's what a huge part of this is talking about the specific needs of a specific community and how the police department can make that connection better. And then going towards the information and the misunderstanding, I think it probably starts with two things. One, has the police department in the past done everything right for and to the Black community? No. And so historical wrongdoings are factual, but then it also becomes this connection divide. And so instead of when something happens, everybody knowing, oh, hey, no, I trust this person. Let me talk to this person. Let me find out more. Like there is in a lot of other communities, there's not as strong of one, and it's not as prolific in the Black community with the police department. And I think that's what we're trying to grow here too. But there's also just an attempt for those who are working hard, who have that great connection with the police department in the community, there's people who attempt to divide that. And that doesn't benefit anybody. And so I think if more and more connections can be made, then when something happens on the police department, everybody will be able to have that connection and understand, either, oh, hey, yep, the police are acknowledging that something went wrong and they're looking into it and investigating it. And if not, then, oh, actually, no, I know their policies. I know these people. This was okay. There's more to the story than what's actually than what some people are trying to drive that narrative. And I think we are obviously a microcosm of the entire country. It's easier to get clicks and likes of negativity and divide than it is to come together and get clicks and likes of positivity.
Yeah, I think that I'm thinking back to the phone call that you gave me a little over a year ago when you re-invited me back to some of these conversations in this work as far as advocating for the African-American community and working in support of the police department and the relations with us. That's the same energy that you had on the phone that day. Like, you hit me up and you were just like, hey, we got some things that we need to work on and some things we want to acknowledge. And we're not coming at this as, experts on all things black or black public safety. And we want to bring you in as someone who can kind of help us facilitate some of these discussions and arrive at some destinations that we really want to arrive at with the community. So I've always appreciated your humility and also the departments for realizing that sometimes you do have to look into the mirror a little bit and work some things out. And one of the best ways of doing that is by sometimes inviting other people in. So I really appreciate that. And I think that that's going to help build trust. But what does transparency really look like to you? And what are some of the best ways that we can continue to build that trust in our community?
So transparency, I think, starts with obviously making sure everyone knows what our policies are. There's a lot of agencies that are not transparent about their policies, their use of force policy, their rules and regulations. There's 18,000 law enforcement agencies in this country, and some of them are operating wildly reckless still. And so it starts with everybody being able to turn towards policy and look at that and know that those policies are rooted in best practices across the country. Then it's also knowing that if someone makes a complaint, that we take it serious. We have policies also related to investigating those complaints. Now, there are some things that I think the community doesn't always understand in regards to human HR rules and legal rules as to what we can talk about. And I don't know if you had some experience of that in your time in the mayor's office of dealing with some of that stuff.
Yeah, even outside of that, non-politically, like some of the things I did in education. I mean, when you talk about HR, every system has its human resources or it's things that, can't always be openly as broadcasted as we always would like.
Right.
Every system has that.
Yeah, big time. And so while some people want to know exactly if it's of a serious discipline, it's open record and people can find out what that is. But if it's, hey, you need some verbal counseling, or hey, you got a department letter from us because you made a mistake, but those are the HR rules that we can't just necessarily tell everybody. But then it's also understanding that I think one of the biggest frustrations is there is a lot of law surrounding civil service jobs and the ability to discipline. It's just kind of thinking about where we would be going on these conversations. And so many times you see sometimes leaders advocating for immediate terminations, and they point to Philadelphia or somewhere else where an officer appears to have made a mistake, not sure, and the next day they're terminated. What they don't know is 18 months later, that officer gets their job back because the investigation wasn't done, there wasn't due process done, and what could have been a meaningful investigation and potential termination to get rid of an officer who doesn't need to be a police officer anymore. It was performative instead of long lasting. And then it also separates the department from moving towards a culture of accountability and towards a culture of transparency. And it actually is just like, oh, well, they'll get their job back. And so why would any officer change when that's what it looks like? Instead, we want to take our time, make sure everything's done right, look into it. But ultimately, if discipline happens, it needs to stick so the public can trust that this behavior's been corrected Everybody on the department knows this needs to change. And so it's frustrating. I understand that sometimes not all of that can be talked about in open because of HR things, because of legal things, but it's having these conversations and people understanding a lot of times we're guided by law, and that's what we have to deal with.
Yeah, and I love that, even sitting at this table here, we can get as close as we possibly can to some of those issues and as far as explanation goes on this platform. So another thing too, I personally really love the trajectory that you guys are taking the culture of Tulsa policing. My background as far as, my awareness goes, it goes back to Chief Jordan, because he was chief when I was in the mayor's office and got to know him and some of the others that worked directly with him, Jonathan Brooks and some of the others, and just was really fond of those people. And then obviously after him came in Chief Franklin and now Chief Larson and yourself, our leadership. And I've just kind of had a chance to watch the flow and the culture that you're talking about of building like more transparency. I can see what kind of brick by brick that foundation is being laid. And I think about, how many times in some of the conversations we've had with community leaders over the last year, a lot of the community sting that has been elaborated on, a lot of it comes, prior to that. So in some cases, it could be, 10, 20, even 30 years ago, something that happened and, it's still very much relative in their lives and in their minds. They're holding, I don't want to say grudges because, in some cases, some things were probably, extremely real to them. But those experiences, even if they were decades ago, are still very impactful right now. And you guys, are doing your best to acknowledge some of that. But I really like the flow that you guys are taking the department right now. And one thing I want to be really clear on is, Deputy Chief, when you called me, you didn't call me because you wanted me to just be, approving everything or just supporting everything or, trying to make the department look good in any, unnecessary way. I mean, there was the responsibility for me to be, honest about some of the things that I would be sharing on behalf of the community. And if I see something that needs to be pointed out or corrected, to be able to mention that too. And I say that to say that if I saw something or smelled something that wasn't right, I would not be sitting here smiling and acting like everything was good, in between you and I or between our people and the culture. Because I have had a chance to see the trajectory of things going back to the past few police department administrations, I can say, quite confidently that I see the necessary steps being made to build that better system of transparency and accountability too. So I wanted to say that right off top, because there's going to be some people who even see this now and they're like, he's there was a time in my life too where, I'm not anti-police, but extremely suspicious. I've been out with bullhorns at rallies and calling for terminations, like you just said a minute ago, so-and-so's got to go and that kind of thing. But now that I do get to see that, I can see that there are some steps that you guys are taking that a lot of departments just aren't taking. They don't feel either the political pressure to do so or don't have the moral courage to just do it on their own unless pressured to do it. So I can say that confidently today, and I wanted to say that up front.
And
publicly.
And two of the things I want to mention on that is, one, in 1997, we made the affirmative move to fully go with a 4-year college degree. And it has taken, if you think about it, 30 years for us to turn over an entire department that now has a 4-year college degree. And I think that's where you also see some of that cultural turn is with education. And we know this throughout the country. With education comes so much better opportunity, but also so much of a critical eye on what are we doing? Why are we doing this? And so those are the leaders, officers, frontline supervisors, all the way up to the chief. Those are those leaders who have been putting a critical eye on our training, on our investigations, on everything, and going, why are we doing this? And so that it has taken a while, but now we basically have an entire workforce that is college educated. Also, body-worn camera has been great for transparency. Most of the time, it's when we hear about it and we look into it, it's not exactly what happened in regards to what's being alleged. But if it is, we go, ooh, yeah, that is not good. We need to investigate that. And sometimes, though, it's not even about necessarily wrongdoing, but it's more about just, could we have interacted better with the community member we were there to serve? You know, we go on 250 to 270,000 calls a year, interact with hundreds of thousands of people. Yeah. And so if we are having some bad interactions that we're seeing, and we need to change how that officer interacts, but it could also be what's going on with that officer. But the two things, that 4-year college degree and body worn camera is huge for transparency as well as cultural shift.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, hey, if you ever thought about having living a life of crime, let me tell you right now, it's a bad idea, because there is no place really in society these days that isn't being watched. Surveillance is everywhere. With the advancements that we have now in forensics and, like I said, overall surveillance, you're not going to get away with it. And that also goes for the department as well, like you said, with the cameras and everything too. So there's no reason to take that risk. Be a person of character and do things the right way, because you will be held accountable. And that goes for those who wear a badge and those who don't. I love that.
And I'm going to drop a stat real, since I dropped a call stat. You know, I think when people talk about use of force, and I know that's huge, and I know that has been abused in the past, and there are members in the African American community that definitely have real stories about that. So we go on 250,000 calls. Of those, we only make about, and those are victim generated calls. Those are, I've been victimized, please come help me. So we go to that call. It ultimately only ends up in about 15,000 arrests of the 250,000 calls. And of those 15,000 arrests, only about 0.2% are a use of force occurring. So I think a lot of people think that it occurs at a much higher rate than it really does.
Juneteenth, the festival, has had an incredible history, a legacy in our community for many years. I mean, like, Tulsa is really known for like celebrating Juneteenth and Martin Luther King Day, like larger and more lively than most cities throughout the nation. It's just part of our culture. It's even bigger than a holiday. It always has been. But obviously last year at Juneteenth, there was the unfortunate tragedy that took place. It's still on a lot of people's minds, and they're wondering what this year is going to look like. I've always gone to Juneteenth religiously. Like, it was something that my family would always do, and we're always proud to be a part of those festivities. And thinking about our culture and what the date meant, and the experiences of our ancestors and everything. But for last year, for whatever reason, I probably didn't have a babysitter or something like that. I didn't make it out. And then obviously the tragedy did take place. And people are wondering, what this year is going to look like, and if they should, feel safe when they go out. So can you just kind of talk a little bit about maybe TPD's approach to, protection and safety this year for this year's festival?
Greenwood falls into the geographical boundary of the Gilcrease Division. And so the division commander for Gilcrease, Major Mark Onesorge, and several others have been working with the organizer of Juneteenth, but also the organizer of the Black Wall Street motorcycle rally, Legacy Fest going on. And it's really being invited into that space to help more for a public safety aspect. Everybody down on Greenwood is all in and has been.
Nice.
Yeah. And so it's bringing all the things we do with every other event in the city of Tulsa to try to work with the organizer, Mayfest, Oktoberfest, you name it. We have meetings regularly like, hey, be thinking about this, be thinking about that. We're going to be around here supporting you on the outside of your fest, because we can't just dedicate officers to special events. That's a permit process through the city, and they have to be paid for. But what we can do, though, is we can be aware of those events. We've been able to expand our downtown operations into Greenwood, having been invited in to do so, and we've seen great success with that already in protecting the safety at night of those trying to just have a good time down on Greenwood. And that's what we look forward to doing with the Juneteenth Festival as well. The organizers working with us and is doing a great job of reassessing how can we still have a wonderful celebration, but also kind of maneuvering it around so that it mirrors the safety focus of a lot of the other festivals that occur.
I mean, you have to do something a little bit different, but at the same time, you don't want to, make people feel like they can't celebrate, or for the celebration to not feel like the party that it should be too. So I was just kind of wondering what that balance would be like a little bit of heightened security / still a festive environment.
Yeah, so it is an increase in police in the area, but it's also an adjustment of what time's it going to start. Just there's also a crime prevention strategy called crime prevention through environmental design.
Okay.
And so it's working with the organizers of, hey, if you happen to put up barriers here and barriers here, it kind of allows people to not just lurk in the shadows of your event kind of thing. Okay. So it's really giving all those strategies that we give to other events and letting them know, hey, we're here to support you. Our goal is anyone who wants to hold a festival in town, our goal is to make sure that thing goes off without a hitch and that everybody gets to come and experience it. And especially when you're talking about something like Juneteenth, we want to make sure everybody feels safe so that can be a great festive environment.
We want it to feel the way that it always feels. Like I said, that's why the festival has been tradition in our community and always successful. I mean, different people have organized it over the years, but the turnout, has always been quite sufficient. And, just even me, I like to get back out there this year. I want to feel protected. I want to feel safe. But at the same time, I want to kick it. I want to have my lawn chair. And, you don't necessarily want to see, you don't want to feel, something we hear about a lot is feeling over-policed or anything like that. Because I think generally, I say our community is safe and behaves, quite appropriately.
100%.
That's why I say that's why it's always so successful. But at the same time, this did happen last year. And unfortunately, I'm still thinking about the families that were affected by that. But the legacy will live on, and I'm happy to know that you guys are thinking about it and thinking about us, thinking about our well-being, and also going to make sure that the parameters are set so that we can kick it and celebrate without stressing about safety this year.
All I want to do is tell people, if you see an increased presence of Tulsa police officers, it's not because we're suspicious.
There you go.
It's because we've been invited to try to help make sure everybody is safe.
There you go.
And so every officer down there knows my goal is to make sure everyone I see here has a fun time and gets to go home at the end of the night.
So you're saying that more officers have been invited to the party?
Yes. Nice.
I like that you said that, because if we see it, somebody's going to, we're going to notice it. We're going to be like, oh, there's more obvious police presence this year, and we all can assume we know the reason why. But y'all heard it first right here. They've been invited to the party, and we're going to have a good time together this year. And that's what I'm looking forward to. What can the community do? Like, what role can we play in keeping this event safe, but, events in general safe? How can the community best support you all as well?
I think probably the best thing would be to report in the manner that everybody else would report about a violent safety concern. Don't brush it off as, well, I don't want to get that person in trouble. If you suspect someone is going to do something violent, please find a police officer and let them know your concern. Feel free to say something to us and know that we're going to keep that in confidence as best as we can, and we're going to go address your concern. We're going to be professional about it, and then we can move on. And if there's some folks up to no good that are planning to do something, the best thing we can do is get out in front of that and let us know in advance. And I will tell you that people that like to try to say that, and this kind of comes full circle, that there's such a significant divide between the African-American community and Tulsa Police Department. It's so awful. It's so awful. I don't believe that to be true, because the reason we have such a high solve rate for homicides in this city compared to any other city in the entire country, because the community trusts us and calls us and tells us what's up. And so if that divide was so great, we'd be like Chicago. It'd be like 35% solve rate. It'd be like 50% solve rate. And it's not. And so do we have plenty to move together towards? We do. But I think that foundation's still there, and That's all I'd ask for the festival, for any downtown thing. Just please trust us to call us and get out in front of it before it becomes something that nobody wants it to turn into.
Love that. So you guys heard it first here. Like, this is our first podcast. So if you've tuned into this one, you kind of got a chance to hear about the origins of this podcast and what brought us here to this point. We're going to be doing this, try to be as timely as possible, maybe cranking out a few each month. And we want to invite everybody who is listening to this to feel free to share it, because, again, this is information that is really only beneficial if you take the time to listen to it and let people know that they have a place that they can go to learn about what kind of goes on with our police department and keeping our community safe. So feel free to share this as often as possible on whatever the platform is. I was talking to my brother maybe a few weeks ago, maybe a couple of months ago or whatever. And I was telling him a little bit about, our relationship, was reminding him of it and kind of what some of the things that you guys had asked me to do. The later it gets, you know how that goes.
Nothing good ever happens after midnight.
I would just let him know, hey man, just keep your head on the swivel. And I know that you guys have been keeping your eye on some of the things that's been going on downtown. And he was just wondering, how I was getting some of the information. Like, how do you know there might be an increased, presence, this weekend or whatever the case might be? And he was like, are you an informant or something? How do you have this information? And I was just like, hey man, I am your brother, first of all. So we're family and everything. But at the same time, I'm a community member and a citizen that cares about our community. And because of that, I got to be at a table, where I can talk to people in law enforcement and can, give warnings to my people and my neighbors and my culture, on things that are happening, just because we want to keep everybody safe. And that's what this has been for me, just a chance to keep, advocating for people and working with you guys has been a pleasure to this point. So I'm excited to say that, I am here in this space and you've never pressured me. If something needs to be said, then let's say it. If something needs to be addressed, then let's address it. Let's be real about everything that we say and do. But that collaboration that we have right now, man, I'm hoping becomes contagious, throughout our city, and that you start seeing a lot of community members, like me, and that has the opportunity to get to know officers like you and to have these type of conversations. And the more that happens, the more we feel linked together. Like, we all have an active role to play in public safety. Like, you don't have to wear a badge. All you got to do is, hopefully you can open your eyes and see something, or open your mouth and say something if you need to. You can do so in a way that doesn't feel scary at all, because we have that relationship. And the more that happens, the better outcomes we're going to have, the more safe events we're going to have. Our kids are going to be raised in understanding that they can play a big part in public safety too. So this education, that's what this is right here, man. We keep talking about communication, and that came up a lot, but it's also education that can happen the more that we communicate. And this is a perfect platform for that. So just want to encourage everybody out there today to share this podcast and keep checking in with us. Again, shout out to Greenwood Cultural Center for setting us up. Everybody over there has been doing great work and really supportive of everything with the department.
The only thing is, this isn't a one and done.
No.
I look forward to many more, and all I would ask of people is to look at this as how we move is little victories. And I think this is a great little victory, and we'll keep having more and more little victories.
Little victories, step by step, brick by brick, on for a safe Tulsa. So again, thanks to everybody for listening today. We'll be uploading it and coming at you guys really soon. Bridging the Gap, Tulsa, Keep Tulsa Safe podcast. All right.
Thank you for listening to Bridging the Gap, presented by the Dialogue Studio at Greenwood. Today's conversation was about more than policing. It was about trust, communication, shared responsibility, and the idea that real progress happens when people are willing to sit at the same table and engage with honesty and respect. As this series continues, we'll keep exploring the issues, concerns, and conversations shaping public safety and community relationships here in Tulsa and beyond, one dialogue at a time. You can listen to Bridging the Gap on Spotify and all major podcast platforms. To learn more about the Dialogue Studio at Greenwood, upcoming conversations, and additional community initiatives, visit thedialoguestudio.org. Until next time, thank you for listening. Thank you for engaging, and thank you for being part of the dialogue.